On today's show, it's time to get the perspective from the opposition camp. Can Miami respond in this game? Is Jimmy Butler healthy? And what actually is the loss of Tyler Herro? And maybe the biggest question, how can Miami deal with the size of the Milwaukee Bucks? Because it was a big problem in game two. All those questions and more, let's get into it.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Bucks. My name's Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday, and also find my work over at ESPN. And alongside me, I didn't even ask this. This is very unprofessional, but I'm assuming from Miami or the Miami area, from 5 Reasons Sports, the 5 on the Floor podcast. I've been on there before. Sean Rochester is going to do some coaching in very short time as well. So last second call up, we appreciate it. Sean, thanks for giving us some time.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. Originally from Miami. I live in Philadelphia actually now. So we can mutually not like the Sixers together. We'll agree on that for sure. But yeah, happy to be on.
All right. So I did mention we have to get to the opposition perspective here if you're a Bucks fan listening to this podcast. Before we do that, I've got to remind you, Saturday night, 6:30 p.m. Central Time, Bucks and Heat Game 3. The series shifts to Miami, and you can catch every minute on the Bucks hometown broadcast with the Sirius XM app. On the SXM app, just search for Bucks, and you'll get Dave Kane, Justin Garcia, and the whole team there on the radio broadcast. We do thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen or first watch of every single day. We appreciate everyone that jumps on the show, drops a comment, a like, a subscription. So do that if you can. It's free to do so. Let's just start with the most simple question of all, and then we can expand from there. From your perspective, are Miami in serious trouble, and do they have a response? Because it felt like a fair body blow in game 2, keeping in mind, obviously, Giannis wasn't there.
Yeah, the only consistent thing about this season for the Heat has been we're an inconsistent team. And so while you look on, game 1, it was probably an outlier game for us, the way that we shot the ball compared to the rest of the season. Game 2, I wouldn't call it an outlier for the Bucks. Yes, they played well, but that's why they're the number 1 seed. They're a great team. And while we didn't play very well, I think coming home we have a chance. I think, game 3 is obviously going to tell a lot. A lot of people are looking back at those previous Bucks series, right? The one where we got swept. There's a lot of fear, I feel like, in Heat fans' hearts when it comes to the Bucks, when it comes to Giannis. And a lot of people feel like we blew an opportunity last night that we could have been up 2-0. You had a team without its best player coming home after that. And normally coming back with a 1-1 split is kind of the goal. But in the situation that we faced, 1-1 is probably a little bit of a disappointment.
It's interesting because I think Miami, because of the names they have on the roster and because of the postseason experience they have, maybe it feels like they're a little bit of a different 8 seed to what you'll typically see, where even if you had won game 1 or the 8 seed wins game 1, most people don't really care. But you did start to hear a few people start to shift and go, hang on a second, if Giannis isn't okay, maybe Jimmy Butler is going to go on a tear. Did you feel that among Heat fans and your readers, your listeners, that there was a confidence that things could change after game 1?
Oh, absolutely. People started looking at, the Knicks-Cavs series, the path into the Eastern. It was like we went from being a team that some of our fans honestly wanted to lose the play-in game against the Bulls because they were looking at draft position. And only a few days later, now suddenly we're back to being cocky Heat fan, and we're, the Bucks aren't going to stand a chance. We're going to go through. We're going to be Heat in 5. It's just kind of that season. It's been the up and down roller coaster of being a Heat fan during this 22-23 season.
So what do you put that down to then? I know there are some older players on this roster, but where is the inconsistency come? Because there's been a couple of teams that I've looked at the standings, and we watch them, but not as closely as you do. And Toronto was the other one. So we asked the question leading into the postseason, what team do you, if you had your preference, would not want to play in the first round series? And for me, it was clearly Miami and Toronto, because Toronto was another team that I just could not figure out how this team was bad when you looked at the players they had on the roster, the versatility, and all those types of things.
Yeah, there's a couple things you can point to. First off, offensively, we've been not good all season. Bottom 10, we're not great. And it's, again, goes back to, you talk about the roster. We have 3 20-point scorers, but the 4 through 8, 9, 10 guys are very inconsistent. The Max Struses, the Duncan Robinsons, the Victor Oladipo, Kyle Lowry, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The thing that I would say I would point to first, though, is shooting. We were last year one of the best 3-point shooting teams, and this year we're bottom of the league. How does that happen? And it's certainly not just PJ Tucker. How does that change happen in one season? It's wild. And you see game 1, shot the ball well, was able to get a win. Last night, did not shoot the ball well, obviously got blown out. That's kind of the barometer, I feel like, the shooting. And then our defense, since the All-Star break, has started to tail off. We're still a top 10 defense in terms of defensive rating. I think we're 7th or 8th in the league right now. But since the All-Star break, it has been kind of inconsistent. And a lot of people don't like the fact that, heat culture, that identity of a tough defensive team that goes back to Pat Riley and Alonzo Mourning. And that started to shake a little bit, where on any given night, you don't know if we're going to be the offensive Heat team or the defensive Heat team. And usually it's one or the other, unfortunately.
The 3-point shooting is fascinating because in game 1, Miami did shoot the ball really well. I mean, insanely well, actually, 15 for 25. But that 25 3-point attempts is such a low number, particularly in 2023. So as I look back and we discussed the game and what's going to happen next, I said, well, yeah, they did shoot the ball well, but I think the Bucks overall would have been happy with the number. I thought the scoring in the paint and the 2-point area was a bigger problem for the Bucks than the 3-point shooting. They do have shooters in the lineup. I know Bam isn't necessarily a shooter, Jimmy as well. 10th overall in the league for 3-point attempts per game. It's bizarre. It's a bizarre setup offensively because, as you pointed to, that's been the struggle for most of the season.
Yeah, I mean, our shooters, the Max Struses, the Duncan Robinsons a few years ago, that was, arguably one of the best, if not the best shooter in the league, has just completely fell out of the rotation. Kyle Lowry is basically unwilling to shoot threes at this point. Gabe Vincent can be streaky. Jimmy Butler, that's not what he does. I know he made one last night or two last night. He just generally doesn't even attempt them. So it's just not what our, you look at the Bucks. I mean, last night, how many did you guys get up? 49. The previous game, you got up 45. That's just not our shot profile. That's not how we're going to play. And it's unfortunate because we don't really get to the rim very well either. We're going to try to beat you in the mid-range. And against a team like the Bucks that like to get into the drop, that's great. But when you lose Tyler Herro, that's probably one of the best on the team at doing that. That makes us even, a little bit more of a handicap.
It's the first time we've podcasted together, but we're already segueing perfectly because I want to get to Tyler Herro next because there's been all sorts of outside opinions, but we want to know from the Miami Heat perspective what he means to this team and I guess what went through the fan base and people like yourself that cover the team when this injury came out. But first, we're going to talk about our friends at Nissan. The most electric player of the week is brought to you by the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. And for me, there's only been 2 games this week. And Bucks fans might say, well, game 1, he didn't play all that well, but he still had the 16 assists. So the Nissan most electric player of the week is going to Drew Holiday. He's actually putting up 20 points and 13.5 assists per game in the series so far. And just like the Nissan Ariya, Drew Holiday, brilliantly fierce, fiercely elegant, stunningly powerful. And the 2023 Nissan Ariya packs Pinty seat power, premium intelligence, all-in-one EV, the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya, the EV for people who love to drive. Shop now at nissanusa.com. I mentioned right off the top, Game 3, 6:30 p.m. Saturday night, Central Time, that is, and you can catch every minute of Bucks and Heat Game 3 with the hometown broadcast on Sirius XM on the SXM app. Just search for Bucks. And you'll listen to Dave Kane, Justin Garcia, our friend Justin, and a great call there if you're not watching on TV and want to listen on the radio. So Tyler Herro, you mentioned the 20-point scorers the Miami Heat team have. You mentioned the perhaps lack of 3-point shooting and the willingness to shoot those threes. Tyler Herro, he's not really afraid of taking any shot. And he is a guy as efficient as Jimmy's been so far this series, and we'll get to him. Herro is the guy that I think if you're an opposition fan, you have some genuine fear about, and he's just had some monster games and hit some monster shots. Where does he rate, if you had to rate the top three players on this team? Because I'm curious to know how you would piece these guys together.
Yeah, I would put him third. I would still put Bam ahead of him, and obviously Jimmy being first. Obviously, what Tyler brings is, the offensive end, where Bam is going to bring it on both ends, but mainly defense. Tyler, that mid-range that we talked about earlier, he's great in that area. He's great in transition, pull-up threes. He can stretch the floor. The counter is that he is someone that you can attack, and the Bucks certainly would have targeted him, just like they're going to target Max Strus, Duncan Robinson, those types of guys, Gabe Vincent, because of his size and inability to defend. But for a team that struggles on offense, to lose that piece, and I think that's where, that controversial comment that Reggie Miller made the other night about the Heat losing Tyler Herro is more significant than the Bucks losing Giannis. I don't think that he obviously meant that Tyler is better than Giannis. Nobody believes that. Maybe Tyler believes that, actually. No one else besides Tyler believes that. But his piece to our offense, to our overall team, we obviously couldn't figure it out last night, and that's going to be the puzzle piece that Spoelstra has to figure out the rest of the season. Whether it's a couple games, whether it's a week and a half, we have to be able to replace his offense.
Yeah, I didn't think that comment was crazy, but again, mostly because I didn't take it in any type of disrespectful way. I did question it at the time because I think you always do. If you cover a team from a different perspective, you look at Miami's rolling in game one, then you take away a two-time MVP, you think, geez, they better figure it out in game two because otherwise the series is going to slip away. So, yeah, I didn't think it was disrespectful, but we've banged on all season long about how deep this Bucks team is. And then we said, well, okay, now you have to prove it. And I think that for the Milwaukee defense, we saw a little bit of it yesterday, and maybe we can pivot to this now. If you are talking about Gabe Vincent, Max Strus has had some big games in the last couple of weeks, so maybe less so. But there is just less of a fear factor for the Bucks defenders. If they do want to help on Jimmy or send a double his way or maybe send another body to Bam, we didn't see a lot of that. They probably just feel more comfortable doing that on players not named Tyler Herro.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Gabe Vincent was good last year in the playoffs. If you remember, he started most of the playoffs because Kyle Lowry was hurt and stepped up really well, I think, in the Philadelphia series. You're not going to have that same fear, certainly, right? Tyler is that guy that has almost the irrational confidence. He's going to get shots up. He thinks he's going to make everything. He's always looking to get the ball at the basket. But it's just filling that gap. Whether, last game he tried Duncan Robinson in the second half of the game when Tyler got hurt, he tried Duncan Robinson. He has the opposite of irrational confidence. It seems like he has no confidence, and he isn't even getting shots up until garbage time last game. If he can get into the game and get shots up, I'm okay with that. The problem that you have with Duncan is he fouls and he's terrible defensively. So you're going to give another guy that they can hunt, whether Giannis is there or not. And the problem with that is if he's not shooting the ball, if he's not creating gravity, what is he out there for? Because it's certainly not defense. So that's the next piece. Is it going to be Caleb? Is it going to be Kevin Love? There's a lot of, questions, I guess, that the coaching staff is going to answer over the next few days as we head into Saturday.
So as I look at the box score, and it's a little bit cliche, but I do genuinely think, and this is just postseason anxiety from fans, I think, but I did see some fans saying, geez, you shouldn't have let Duncan Robinson get going in the fourth quarter. Now, the game was over, but he does hit 4 threes in the fourth. We saw Oladipo knock down a couple of shots. Have you seen any optimism, or do you feel any optimism about Duncan seeing the ball go down in the fourth quarter?
Well, I thought that game 2 was going to be played in the mud, so I bet under 116.5 on the Heat team total. And so certainly that hot shooting at the end did not put me in favor there. But no, you know what? Like, I think there is something to be said about the second half, especially the fourth quarter, where Oladipo and Duncan Robinson kind of got going. But at the same time, like, when you're beating, I don't even know who some of the guys were, Thanasis, those types of, like, what does that really translate into the next game? I just think if I were coaching the Heat in the second half, I'm glad that he didn't show any of his adjustments yet. Like, he didn't go completely zone or something to try to claw back into the game in the second half. He didn't go to his 2-2-1 press or anything like that. Hold those in your pocket so that you have something to go to on Saturday or next week.
The start of this game, and this was something that coming out of game one, and particularly because Giannis wasn't there, we thought that the Bucks were going to go to. They've done it in the back half of the season. Brook Lopez has had by far his best offensive stretch since he was back in Brooklyn. So we're talking 6-7 years. but he was dominant in the first quarter. And the threes came after that, but it was very easily recognizable from the start of this series that I just don't know if Miami have the size full stop to do anything about Brook Lopez if that's the way they want to play. What can they do, I guess, is the question, if anything.
Yeah, I mean, that was the question going into the series. Certainly, we are not a big team. Bam is 6'9" at center, and we've been starting Max Strus or Jimmy Butler, whoever you want to call the four, but we don't really have a true power forward in the starting lineup. And I am under the impression that I wouldn't try to size up and go with like a Kevin Love to try to match size. And I still, even on Saturday, I still wouldn't do that because we're not going to beat the Bucks at their game. You're better than us. There's no doubt about that. So I felt like sizing down, and he stuck with Strus, was the move to go to because you had to lean into being small, being fast, shooting the three, picking up pace, which they did in the first game. But you couldn't do that in the second game because you can't create pace when you're constantly taking the ball out of the net. You guys were killing us inside, killing us on the glass, killing us from three. There was no resistance on defense. I don't know what he's going to do in the third game. I don't think Duncan's going to start again. I would lean towards either Caleb Martin or Haywood Highsmith. More of a defender, more of a guy that you can throw out there that can be physical, but it's still not size. He's not going to start Cody Zeller next to Bam. He's not going to start Omer Yurtseven next to Bam. We just don't have that guy that can go out there. But putting Max Strus on Brook Lopez has kind of seemed to be an issue. I mean, he's 6'5" against, big, Brook Lopez who can just score inside. So, it was a massive breakdown in terms of post defense, but also the point of attack. And that's where I think the Highsmith and Caleb Martin minutes can come in, or Victor Oladipo. You got to provide more resistance so that we're not having to help and not leave Brook Lopez under the basket where there's no resistance.
Yeah, it was almost like the light came on for the Bucks, and some of the passes they were throwing to Brook, I mean, they weren't even in control. They weren't even on point. They're just like, let's just flick it up in the air and he'll just jump up and grab it. So that was clearly a plan going into the game. But once the game started, they realized that there wasn't going to be a lot to slow that down. It'll be fascinating if Giannis comes back for game 3, whether they continue to go to Brook Lopez. Obviously, Giannis, Bucks fans, you would like to have him back on the floor. We haven't really got into Jimmy Butler or Kyle Lowry. I want to ask about the health of those guys, and then we can go from there as we enter the final segment of the show. But first, eBay Motors, our friends of the podcast. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know if the part will fit, or you'll get your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. I said from the top, we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen of every weekday, but it's the postseason, so we're going to be back on the weekend. We'll have a post-game show after Game 3, so make sure you subscribe and turn the notifications on, and you'll know as soon as that show drops. Jimmy Butler, if you just look at the numbers in this series, and obviously he was enormous in Game 1, but even the numbers across the board and in Game 2, from an efficiency standpoint, he was 8 for 12. He had 25 points. So he's been able to score in this series. We've seen him knock down a couple of threes where the Bucks weren't even defending Jimmy Butler. So he's been really good. He also ended the third quarter looking very, very sore. And for obvious reasons, he didn't come back on the floor. But what's going on health-wise with Jimmy? Is this something he's been carrying for a while? And how big of a concern is this 2 days off before Game 3?
Yeah, every indication that I've read today, and again, obviously I'm in Philadelphia, so I'm not there at practice or anything like that, is that he is okay, that he was held out because the game was out of reach. It seemed like it was more of he went either knee to knee or leg to leg with someone on a drive, and it wasn't necessarily like the Jay Crowder was a, quote, dirty play or anything like that. I think he'll be fine. I think he'll be there on Saturday. And, the Kyle Lowry thing, He has been banged up all year long. He sat out for a long time. it was really questionable whether he was either going to suit up anymore. But obviously having him has been very beneficial. I mean, he's just a veteran. He knows how to play. He's not the Kyle Lowry of old. He's not going to go out there and, kill you on any given night. He is capable of it. He shows flashes of it, but I wouldn't count on it. And I would think both those guys suit up on Saturday.
Well, Lowry had that massive playing game just a week or so ago and then sort of pulled up sore from that. So I guess he does still have a game like that in him. And Bucks fans, as well as Bucks fans know the Miami Heat in the postseason, they know those Raptors teams very, very well as well. And Kyle Lowry's had some just monstrous games. His season overall obviously shifts to this bench role. Has there been some real frustration from Heat fans in terms of what they thought this was going to be and how it's played out? Because it does feel like with some of the older guys, it's going to be a fascinating team to watch moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he was brought in as a guy that was supposed to be the piece to kind of link everything together. And I think last year he did that. He was as advertised. He did go through some injuries. He did go through some personal things that kept him off the floor. And I think the personal things that kept him off the floor then led to the injury that happened in the playoffs because his conditioning wasn't there. And you could see he tried to go through it with the Philly series and the Boston series, but he just wasn't right. This year, early on, he was playing so many minutes when we were without guys. I went to a game in Washington where he had a triple-double, and he was playing like 50 minutes in an overtime game. And Kyle Lowry at his age should not be doing that. And ultimately, that wear and tear early on, I think, led to his injuries that kept him out most of this season. And now he seems to be better. I just don't know how much you can trust him to hold up. Like in terms of next year, he's going to be an expiring contract. You trust him to be your starting point guard? I don't necessarily think so. He's probably a piece that you look to move. You attach something to him, whether it's a pick, whether it's a young guy like Nikola Jovic, whatever it may be. He seems to be the piece, along with like the Duncan Robinsons and Tyler Herros, that once we get to the offseason, that are the most likely to be involved in trade talks.
A couple more for you. Let me ask you about Bobby Portis from your perspective, because we discussed him on the show yesterday. And this is a man, and trust me, I mean, I'm not saying you can say whatever you want, but I personally couldn't give a stuff. There is some things that you could say that might not be popular with the listenership here, though. So I will say this. But yesterday, Bobby Portis, and we see this not all the time, but semi-regularly, and clearly he was pretty amped up for yesterday. But he was on the line, and he was teetering on the line for the entirety of that game, which, as you could see in the broadcast, Bucks fans are absolutely frothing over. They are loving every single second of it. But I imagine if you're a Miami Heat fan, you are just like, I hate this man right now.
And it's totally understood, because especially for Heat fans that are of my age, that are approaching 40, we remember back to the Pat Riley Heat, the Alonzo Mournings, the PJ Browns. We have Udonis Haslem, even at 42 on our bench, that still has that Heat culture in him. And Bobby Portis is one of those guys. If he were on our team, we'd love him. We would embrace him. He would be Heat culture through and through. He's not on our team because we didn't pursue him well enough a few summers ago. But I appreciate what he does in this game, in this series. I think he's obviously trying to go after Bam. He's trying to get in Bam's head. He's chirping at Bam all the time, clapping at Bam all the time. And it kind of woke up Bam last game for that little stretch, which as a Heat fan, I kind of appreciate. Thank you, Bobby. The little technical foul, the little elbow that he threw at Lowry, I'm not so good with that. The Spo came on the floor for the timeout. I don't know if you saw that. It's a big thing with Heat fans that he was trying to go back to his bench. He ran into Spo and kind of threw a little like, I don't know, half push. I mean, he's not trying to fight Spoelstra. Spoelstra would, Spoelstra can hold his own. He almost fought Jimmy last year. So, no, you know what? I get it. It's one of those things where he's that guy that when he's on your team, you love him. When he's not on your team, you absolutely despise him.
I was thinking actually to that stretch with Bam there, I was thinking if I was the Bucks and Brook Lopez had a couple of fouls, they're obviously worried about the size situation at that point of the game when it was still a game. But I was thinking, get him off right now, because he's been in Bam's face. Now Bam has knocked down 3 straight jumpers and Bam's talking back to him. So I thought, sometimes it works, sometimes it goes a little bit too far. But speaking of those types of players, Bucks fans are still pretty furious about PJ Tucker and the fact that they didn't bring him back and didn't pay for him. I think they were even more furious that he went to the Miami Heat. What happened last off? Was he a player that you guys or the general fan base wanted back?
Wanted him back, yes. At the price, no.
Right,
I mean, if you look at what Philly paid for him that extra year, he's going to be a bad contract very quick. And again, living in Philadelphia and hearing what they talk about on like sports talk radio here, which is the most toxic thing in the world if you've ever been to Philadelphia, they are not huge fans of him. I don't think they use him very well. I think in Miami he was opened up. I would honestly say that we used him better than you did in Milwaukee. But that's also as a product of we don't have a Giannis that can control, or a Drew Holiday that can control the game, or a Chris Middleton that can control the game too. And he's that hustle guy that's going to work hard in the corner, shoot threes, crash the offensive glass, kind of be the glue guy that you need to win a championship. And we're missing him. The fact that we let him go and we kept Caleb Martin, who tried to play that role and actually has probably been our fourth best player this season, but he's not PJ Tucker. He can't size up. Like if we had PJ Tucker, we could put him on Brook Lopez and he would fight his tail off and keep him away from the basket. He's not as tall as him, but he'll fight. Caleb Martin can't do that. Max Strus certainly can't do that. We've seen that. So he's that piece that we definitely miss. But at that price, I still don't go back with any regrets that we didn't sign him on that number, because it would make our cap situation that is already pretty hellish even worse.
No, very reasonable. Well said. And that contract, yeah, it's going to be fascinating. It takes him through to about 40 years old or something like that. So, yeah, interesting stuff by the Sixers there. And for the Bucks, obviously, they pick up Jay Crowder, and he hasn't had a great series so far. So we'll see if he can start to get it together. But as I said, Game 3, 6:30 p.m. Central Time. It must be 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time if I've got my world clock accurate there on Saturday night down in Miami. And we'll see. I'm not one of those people out there that's saying this is over, because I think, again, because of some of the names in this team, it shifts home, and we'll see if Miami has a response. Sean, I know you got to go and coach. I literally messaged you about 10 hours ago or something silly like that and said, any chance of doing this? So I appreciate it, and it's good to get the perspective from the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. My tag is S Rochester NBA. I contribute to 5 Reasons Sports. If you're looking for Heat content, maybe an opposite view, we do playbacks during the game. You can also check us out. 5 on the Floor is our Twitter account, podcast, all that different stuff. But I appreciate you having me on.
Easy, man. Yep, definitely go and listen to that stuff, because I do think I always find it interesting anyway to get the local stuff from the other teams there. All right, you go, coach, and we will be back after Game 3 with a post-game show. Frank will be with me there, so we appreciate everyone listening. Like I said, drop a comment in, a like, and subscribe and all those things. It helps us. It's free to do, and we'll catch you after Game 3.